I bought the bike that no one else wanted to see if it's possible to fix its problems and sell it for a profit. All as part of my challenge to flip my way from £100 up to an e-bike that I plan to give away to my dad at the end of this series. In this video I'll show you everything I had to do to get this bike from a pile of parts to showroom ready. So follow along to episode 5 to see how much money can be made from this unwanted bike. So this bike had been on Facebook Marketplace for a number of weeks and it was listed for £300. And I noticed that last week it was reduced to £260. And I delved into the listing a little bit more. And I think the reason why it was reduced and it hadn't sold, because it was noted that there was no front brake. And when most people see those sorts of issues, they're not interested in buying the bike. So this week I decided to get in contact with the seller and just to confirm with them that it was only the front brake that was missing from the bike and that everything else was perfectly fine. And they confirmed that this was the case and that the bike was completely in working condition. And so what I did was to put a cheeky offer of £200 in. They then came back to me and said that they would not do any less than £220, which I was kind of tempted to go for because I know when these are fully done up, they can go above the £300 mark. And I thought, well, if it's just replacing a front brake, they're not too expensive, it could be some easy profit. But I only had £210 in cash. So I said, I'm sorry, 210 is the maximum I can go. They then came back and said, yeah, that's absolutely fine as long as you collect this evening. Now, you might be wondering why the bike is in several parts. And it's not just to get a nice clickable thumbnail for the video. It's practically because I had to get the bike into bits to get it into the car. And that's because the seller didn't tell me that the through axle has been stripped, it's been machined. Now when I'm going to pick up a bike, I'll usually just take a multi-tool, so I have very limited options in actually getting the through axle out. And unfortunately, because I couldn't get the front wheel out, even with the fork completely deflated and with the tyre deflated, it wouldn't quite fit into the back of my car. So what I had to do was to unbolt the stem and actually remove the fork from the bike, which on the side of the road was a terrible idea because as soon as I pulled the stem off, the whole thing fell onto the floor. I had bearings and spacers scuttling down the road. So it was fairly embarrassing for me having to spend about 5 minutes going and finding all the bits from underneath the car. Anyway, I did get it in there and now the bike is in multiple pieces. So what we'll do now is we'll get the bike in the bike stand and take a closer look at any other issues that we're going to have to address in order to flip this bike for a good profit. Right, so let's have a look at the condition of the bike. So starting off with the frame, it's actually in pretty good condition. There's a few little blemishes and a few little marks, but I think overall the frame will polish up quite nicely. Then moving on to the drivetrain. So the overall condition is, it's fairly dirty. It's in need of a good deep clean. In terms of the wear on the chain, it's just at the 0.75 millimeters of wear. I think we'll get that cleaned up, re-oiled and then back on the bike and that should be okay. So the tyre is pretty much 100% worn out. As you can see here, they've obviously only been using the rear brake, so I would imagine they've been probably locking it up a fair amount. However, it's kind of come at a good time this, because on my own personal bike, in the last video I mentioned this, the rear tyre on my bike has got down to about 20% life. So what that prompted me to do was to go ahead and buy a brand new tyre, and what I'll do is I'll put that on my own personal bike and then replace the 20% tyre on here. So yeah, you're getting a worn tyre, but it's not going to be anywhere near as bad as this. Bottom bracket is spinning freely and there's no amount of play. However, as you can see, it is really gunked up down there. So I think what I'm going to do is pull the cranks off and then give it a really good clean around there and just 100% make sure that the bottom bracket's okay. And then I'm not really too sure about the headset. So all the pieces, as you can see there, ended up rolling down the road and I collected what I think was all of it, but we'll have to see when we put it back together. When I was testing the bike, the headset didn't feel worn, but you can kind of mask that a bit by tightening up the top cap. So we'll have to see if that feels worn out. So when I've tested the gears, they are performing okay. It just fails to get onto the big ring. So I'll just have to adjust the cable on that and make sure it shifts through the whole gear range and nice and smoothly as well. So, as I've mentioned, the front brake was missing from the bike when I bought it. And the guy said that he'd removed it and then he'd lost the front brake, which I initially thought was a little bit suspicious. But actually, when I've done some more diagnosis, I can understand why I think that is. And when I spin the front wheel up, you might be able to just see that there's just a little bit of warping on the rotor. It's only by probably a millimetre or two, but that will be enough to cause a fair amount of noise when you're riding along. And so what I think they've done, they've just removed the front brake altogether. So the fork, as you can see, is a little bit dirty and it's got quite a lot of mud and stuff around the seals. Now I've got a bit of a unique plan for this. So once I've finally extracted that through axle, I was thinking, oh, I might have to order another one. What I do have is from my own personal bike. When I upgraded the fork, I kept the forks. So there's some RockShox Judies here. They just need a bit of a cleanup. When I last used this fork, it had been freshly serviced. And so my plan is to put the wheel onto this old fork once I've cleaned it up and get this on the bike. And then I can keep this fork, which has got the more modern black stanchions. I can keep that for stock in case I need to use it for any other bike. And that just saves me a little bit of time having to pull that one apart and then give it a service. And apart from that, I think that's pretty much everything that I've got to do on the bike. So I'm going to go through now, strip the frame down, start getting stuff cleaned up, and then put back on the bike. First, I had to get the strip through axle loose using a bolt extraction kit that I had lying around. I was quite took back at how much force was required to get this loose, and I can certainly see why it was stripped.
Bloody hell.
That was an endeavour. That is why you don't over tighten your through axle, because it will strip and it'll get stuck. So yeah, don't do that. Then I moved on to removing the other components from the bike, ready for a deep clean. You can certainly see the amount of crud that accumulates in the places that aren't completely accessible. That's why it's useful every now and again to strip the components off your bike and give them a nice deep clean.
Look at that.
Right, so the bike is now pretty much taken to bits. So all I've got to do now is go outside and give them a really nice, good, deep clean. Here I'm using a diluted detergent first, and then using a mix of hard and soft bristled brushes to agitate the old oil and crud from the components. Right, okay, so that is all the components cleaned up and ready for reinstallation on the bike. I think what I'm going to do is give the frame a very quick polish. There's a few marks here that you can see. I might just see if I can find some touch-up paint for that. Just really brings the quality of the bike up to that next level. But apart from that, I think all the components cleaned up quite nicely. It was a little bit more work than I anticipated. I think in future, I'm definitely looking out to try and get some sort of ultrasonic cleaner, because I think that will really speed things up. But the industrial units are very expensive to buy, so I'm gonna have to save up a little bit of money and make that investment later down the road, I think. I then assembled the headset to check for wear, probably using a little bit too much grease here, but having seen how rusty these bearings can get, if I were the next owner, I'd rather it was a bit more greasy than not. Luckily, when I assembled the front end, the bearings still felt really smooth and with next to no play. Before we get on and build the bike, I just want to say a massive thank you to those of you that grabbed one of the bike maintenance tracker posters that you can see to the side of me that we launched last week. I was really on the fence about whether I wanted to put something like this out there, but I found my own so useful, and I thought, you know what, the community might also find it useful as well. A few people were wondering why I was only offering it as a PDF that you could print yourself, and the main reason was because when I looked at print-on-demand versions of this in the size and the quality and the material that I wanted, it was going to be well over £40 per print, which is just ridiculous considering this one cost me less than £20 from a large online printing service. And I got this in like a waterproof material as well, so that you can use whiteboard markers on it and rub it off. And that came, as I said, that came to less than £20. So I thought it's a lot more cost effective. It also means that if the poster gets damaged or something, you can print it out again, or you can even print it at home in the size and the material that you like. So I thought it gives a lot more options for people. Anyway, I don't want this channel to become some sort of online e-commerce store. I do all this as a hobby. It's very rewarding for me and I really enjoy doing it. But I do want to keep on improving the videos and making them better and better. And as part of that, any profits that I make from little side projects like this always going to get reinvested into the channel, making them better, buying better equipment, and providing a little bit more capital for some maybe bigger and more crazy projects that I can document in future. Anyway, a massive thank you to those of you that have checked the posters out, and I hope that you find them as useful as I found mine. Back to the video. Before I could assemble the new front brake, I needed to get the warp disc rotor running true again. Right, so we're going to attach one of these zip ties, and then we can use this as a bit of a gauge to see exactly where the warp in the rotor is. So what I'll probably do is just chop that down a little bit. You can actually see where it's warping towards the rotor. So when it gets to the closest part, which is about there, we can then mark it on, just a bit of marker pen, not on the braking surface, right here. And then we're going to get a adjustable wrench. So just need to repeat this a few times. And with a little bit of adjustment, you can see that is running much truer. Hopefully that should mean no rubbing when we get the brand new caliper and brake system on there. Right, so this has just arrived in the post. So what I bought is a Shimano MT200 because I quite like them, they're a nice reliable unit, and also this was way cheaper than any of the competitor brands, even the cheap ones like Clark's and Tektro. They were more expensive than this. So I'll run through the spend at the end of the video, but I think this was a really good deal to put on this bike. So let's get it on there. Right, so that kit didn't come with the spacer for the 180mm rotor. Now unfortunately, so I normally like to order stuff not on Amazon, but unfortunately eBay was going to be too slow. I then got this freshly cleaned chain back onto the drivetrain and oiled up ready so that the gears can be re-indexed and so they can run nice and smoothly again. Just put a little bit more cable through. Perfect. All I've done is go outside and give it a clean, and then a spray of black spray paint, and then a nice thick layer of clear coat over the top. So hopefully that should stay looking pretty fresh for a while. As you can see, the saddle is way too far forward. The max line is there, and it certainly shouldn't be. That seat post just needs tightening a little bit on the clamp. Move that back a little bit, and then once we've got it on the ground, we'll level this properly. Right, so that's pretty much the bike all assembled. The last piece to go on are the grips. Now, These original ones that came with the bike are, as you can see, really gummed up. I just don't think, I could probably get away with leaving these on and letting the owner decide if they want to replace it, but I think it just kind of ruins the look of the bike. The rest of the bike is looking really smart, so as luck would have it, I've just, on my own personal bike, changed to these race face grips, which leaves some Boardman grips ready to go on this bike, and I think that will really just finish it off in the standard that I want to bring this bike up to. And with that finished, let's see a before and after. Right, so that's the bike complete. So I just took it outside to get some shots of it complete and also take some photos for the listing. And I listed it about an hour ago, and the bike has already sold. So I'll go through the numbers in a little bit, but I thought it was a bit of an overview of the bike. Quite happy with how this one's turned out. It's a very reasonable condition for a second-hand bike as well. It's got a brand new front brake on there. These forks were freshly serviced, although they just needed a bit of a clean up. I've touched up any of the small little paint chips in the frame as well, so it looks really clean. Got the drivetrain nicely tuned up. Both brakes are feeling good. All the bearings are fine. I just had to very quickly tighten up the bearings on the back wheel, but apart from that, the rest of the bike is looking really smart. I think just the little things like painting the pedals, it's just the small things that make a big difference, especially if you're taking high quality photos. You've got to have the bike looking really clean, and people have good confidence in it, and it looks like a professional listing then, so people are much happier to pay a little bit more for it. I really hope that the next owner likes it. And the next owner really did like it. So I'm doing this whole project to generate money to buy my dad an e-bike. And whilst it's satisfying to generate some money to go towards that, I think something that's even more satisfying is taking an unwanted and unloved item like this bike and then giving it a new lease of life, especially when the next owner is really pleased and happy with it. Actually, the last bike we sold, the other Boardman, was sold to a father and son. And when they came to collect it, the look of excitement on their face when they saw the condition of the bike and they got to have a ride around the car park on it was absolutely gold. And to see them so happy about the bike was even more of an achievement to me than the money that was generated. And especially because I don't want you to be fooled by the apron and the outfit. I am no bike mechanic. Everything that I know has been self-taught from YouTube videos. And the apron is actually an espresso barista apron. It's not even a bike mechanic apron. And I'm 100% sure there are things that I can improve on and get better with over time. But for me, just having the end customer really happy with the product is just a really great feeling. Anyway, going back to the money. So I'm happy to report that we did make a profit on this. But first, let's go through the spend. So the Shimano MT200 brakes were $24.99, and the adapter to go from 160mm to 180mm rotors was $4.99. Unfortunately, that didn't come as part of the kit. So there was a number of spare parts that I pulled off my old bike and put onto this bike, and I could try and make some sort of an estimate as to how much they're worth, but they're probably not going to be worth very much. At least they're not worth very much to me. And actually, we now have a more modern RockShox duty fork that we sell for a lot more than the fork that I had beforehand. So it probably all evens out, and I'm happy just to write off those components. And again, I do have some operating costs such as the fuel, water, detergent, those sorts of small costs. And depending on where I have to travel to pick up and drop off the bikes, it generally ends up being under £10. I'm not going to include those numbers in with this challenge, but I will go through all those numbers at the end of the series for those people that are interested. So that brings my total spend, including the bike, to £239.98, or let's just round that up to £240. And I ended up selling the bike very quickly for £340, giving us a nice round profit of £100, which is not bad for around 4 hours of work. Now I do think I probably could have pushed it to the 360 to 380 mark, but I'd been waiting around for someone to buy the bike for a number of weeks, and I'd rather just get on with the next project. Anyway, let me know in the comments if you think I could have got more money for this, and let me know how much you'd have been personally willing to pay for the bike knowing the condition. And so that brings our total project cash pot up to £466. So we're really cracking on now, probably getting quite close to the halfway mark of the project. And so looking forward, and because you've got this far in the video, I'll give you a little bit of a heads up on the next bike that we're going to flip. And let me just say, whilst you might think the condition of this bike that we bought today was bad, just wait until the next episode. And if you're interested in watching the next episode, click the series playlist here. And if you're all caught up and you want to be notified when the next episode comes out, click here. Thank you.